In this video, we are going over how much it costs to own 3 levels of cars: a cheap car, a luxury car, as well as a supercar. And we actually got to speak to a McLaren Artura owner today and get his first-hand experience on how much it costs to own and maintain his car on a yearly basis. We're also going to go over how much you should be making in order to afford the different classes of cars today, so let's get into it. For the cheap car today, I've chosen a 2024 Toyota Camry SE 4-door sedan, not the most basic of Camrys out there, but one of the more basic models that the Camry does come in. And to keep things simple today, I'm just going to be comparing new cars only against each other, just so that we have an apples to apples comparison across all the different categories of cars. Now on Edmunds.com, their true cost to own calculator actually puts this Camry costing you $45,793 over 5 years, which comes out to around $9,158 per year. So we can actually see that it's still quite pricey to own a cheaper car. I mean, the average American salary is roughly $59,000 a year. So imagine getting a new budget car and it still takes up around 15% of your annual salary every year. Now, granted, some of these costs are hidden, so you're not going to incur them on a yearly basis out of pocket, but you will incur them after 5 years, and these costs include things like depreciation. Now, one of the biggest expenses on this Camry is in fact depreciation, which will cost you $11,449 over 5 years. And it's just a fact, guys, 99% of cars will depreciate or have a reduction in their value over time due to wear and tear. And depreciation on cars is definitely one of the reasons why I think investing a ton of money in a new car is usually a bad idea. You are literally putting money in an asset that goes down in value over time, so your money is just not growing. If you want to save money in this category, what you want to do is to try to avoid buying new cars. So famously, when you buy a new car and you drive it off the lot, it becomes a used car and then it immediately drops usually 10 or 15% in value. If we look at car depreciation curves online, different cars will have different depreciation curves, but the sweet spot to buy a car is somewhere usually in the 3 to 5 year used range. That's just basically when most of the depreciation has been chipped off already, but the car is still, quote, new enough so that it's not exactly a problem car that you're going to have to spend a ton of money on maintenance on. So that's just an option that you could do, but for the sake of today's video, let's keep going. So the next category here are taxes and fees. Now, you're not going to get around this, but this category will cost you around $3,578 over 5 years, and this includes any base taxes, any license and registration fees, as well as any gas guzzler taxes if applicable. For financing here, they have us at $6,361 for 5 years, and this is the interest expense you will incur based on the assumption that you're putting 10% down on the car and you're financing the car for about 5 years or 60 months. Then you have fuel or gasoline. This will come out to $12,550 for 5 years, which annually comes out to around $2510 per year. Edmunds assumes that you drive your cars about 15,000 miles per year, and that is around the equivalent of $210 per month in gas. I think that's somewhat reasonable for a Toyota Camry. Insurance comes out to $7,164 over 5 years, or about $1,432 per year. Repairs and maintenance will cost you around $4,691 over 5 years, which I think is quite reasonable for a car in my opinion, because that means it's less than $1,000 per year. However, given it's a new car, you probably have some items that are going to be covered under your manufacturer's warranty already. Now, I think for the best comparison to the luxury as well as the supercar today, we should put all of these costs in a table on a yearly basis, and then that way we can compare all the costs at the end of the video. So here those numbers are in a beautiful little table. Thank you, editor Ricky, and we'll do this same exercise for the luxury and supercar shortly. But first, let's discuss how much of a salary you need to actually afford the cheap car in today's video. We're going to be using the 10% rule, and that says that you should keep your transportation costs to be less than 10% of your gross income. Our Camry car payment is going to vary depending on our term. So for a 4-year term, it's going to be about $613 per month, but for a 5-year term, it's $505 per month if we put 20% down. Now, the average car payment for a new car is around $735 a month according to Experian, so this Toyota Camry is well below that amount. So let's go ahead and use the 5-year term on the Camry. That means our gross income needed on just the car payment alone is going to be $505 per month times 10. That should be our income per month, and that's $5,050. Essentially, that means you need to be making at least $60K in gross income per year to afford the car payment, but that's not including the fuel, the maintenance, and the insurance costs. If we added those costs in, then you'd have to be making around $109,000 per year to comfortably afford this car with the 10% rule. Now, obviously, these numbers are for those financial maximizers who want to live well below their means and making sure that they have, enough money left over to save and invest, but I think realistically, it usually doesn't play out this way. Chances are, if you make over $100,000 per year, you probably drive a more expensive car than a Toyota Camry, or you may even know some people who make less than 50K per year driving a car like this as well. Still though, the idea is simple. If you can keep as close as possible to that guideline of the 10% gross income rule, you're going to be in good financial shape. Okay, for our luxury car today, I've chosen the Mercedes GLE class SUV. Now, why did I choose this car? It's because it costs around $74,000 in MSRP new. I think that price is the right price for a luxury class type of car, and I also happen to own this car, so what I really wanted to do was corroborate the true cost to own of Edmunds.com and just kind of like make sure that my costs actually align with what's being shown on the website. My model is about 8 years old, so I have a 2016 version, but I've actually only owned it since 2019, so I've had it personally for about 5 years now, and I bought it when it was 3 years used. But let's look at what Edmunds has for its true cost to own for a new version of this. Yes, the 5-year true cost of this car is $101,193 over 5 years, with depreciation being a huge factor here. So funny side story is that when I got this car in 2019, I actually got it with 15,000 miles on it already, and I paid $54,000 for the car itself, but the MSRP of the car when it was brand new was closer to $78,000, and that kind of just illustrates how much depreciation was, already chipped off this car when I got it. And that's pretty much a big tip that I have for you guys. If you actually want to drive luxury, I would just opt for a used model that's a few years old. That way it still feels brand new, but you're not blowing as much money as, say, just buying it brand new off the lot. So the depreciation on this car will cost you $39,225 over 5 years, or $78.45 per year. Then you have taxes and fees on this car. It's $7,529 for 5 years, or about $1,500 per year. For financing, $14,443 over 5 years can be expected in interest costs. Now, I personally just paid off my car as early as possible, so I wasn't faced with those charges anymore. But since you are financing a bigger sum, you're going to pay a lot more in interest on the bigger sum of money that you're borrowing. Fuel and gasoline, $18,726 for 5 years, and this car gets about 21 miles per gallon on the highway and maybe 16 in the cities. And I personally average about 18 miles per gallon, so I can actually say that this is accurate. That means this puts the cost of fuel at $3,745 per year, or $312 per month. So I can tell you that these numbers for fuel are definitely on the money here. So in 2022, I drove this car about 15,000 to 20,000 miles, and I spent $4,525 on fuel. In 2021, I spent $3,026 on fuel for the year, and the way that I know this is that I track everything I spend, so I can just tell you these are the numbers straight up. The past 2 years, I have been living in a city, so I've been driving a lot less and actually walking a lot more. But realistically, if you drive this car 10 to 15,000 miles per year, you can expect to spend that much on fuel. Now, Edmunds.com has insurance at $8,178 over 5 years, but my insurance actually just went up to $3,000 for 1 year alone. Now, I do have the most coverage on my insurance, and I've never been in an accident, so it's not like my rates are inflated because of my bad driving record. So right here, we can see that Edmunds.com is probably underestimating my insurance costs by a little bit, but that's me, and I live in California. For you, if you live in the middle of America or in a different state, your insurance could be a lot less. For maintenance and repairs, you can expect $13,092 over 5 years, or that comes out to about $26.18 per year. Now, I would say that this is pretty accurate. I've had my tires changed a couple of times already, and each tire is usually $400, maybe up to $500. So that means right then and there, a new set of tires is $1,600 to $2,000, plus maintenance is usually $500 to $1,000 every time I go. All right, so here's that updated table. I've tabulated all of the numbers for the luxury as well as the cheap car, and you can see that across the board, the cheap car is much cheaper to own than a luxury car. It really does seem like every single category is much more expensive for the luxury car, so that's something that you have to understand is even though the car payment might be just a few $100s more per month, you are going to spend way more money on all of the other facets of owning that car. Now, in terms of a salary suggestion, the car payment is going to be $1,147 per month on a 5-year term, which means that you should be at minimum making around $137,000 per year just to afford the payment. With insurance, fuel, etc. included, we're realistically looking at $180K, maybe $190K per year to comfortably afford this car using the aforementioned 10% rule. All right, here's some good tips if you want to drive luxury. So number 1, try to trade in your vehicle for as much as you can. Number 2, try to pay off the car as quickly as possible to avoid finance and interest charges. And number 3, if you are going to be performing maintenance on your car, try to avoid the dealership. If you can find a good mechanic, work with them, or if you're able to work on the car yourself, you can actually avoid a lot of the costs from maintaining the car. But chances are, if you are driving a luxury car, you're probably making a good income already, so maybe the right strategy is just to focus on making more money and just letting the dealership take care of your maintenance. All right, so for our supercar today, I had the fortune of meeting up with Alex Buljan, a friend of mine here in the Bay Area, who I actually went to middle school with. We actually reconnected after all of these years because of this video. I was looking for somebody with a supercar and I knew that he had one based on his Instagram, so I have you guys to thank for this next segment because it actually made me do the hard thing, which was pick up the phone and call somebody that I haven't talked to in a long time. Now, supercars are notoriously hard to get concrete numbers for, so we are going to bring him in for some more context on the costs that are harder to find online. I will say that the interview clip was a little bit windy, so I am going to cut back and forth between the interview and me right here, and we'll tabulate his approximate costs in our table today. And again, forgive me for the wind.
My name is Alex Buljan. This is my 2023 McLaren Artura.
The sticker price of this was how much?
Approximately $265,000.
$265,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so on a sticker price of $265,000 for a McLaren Artura, depreciation can vary quite a lot depending on the supercar. Since we didn't really talk about depreciation in our interview, what I actually found from the McLaren forums was that comparable models tend to depreciate at 25% over 5 years. But there are also some cases where certain supercars appreciate, especially if they're a special model or limited edition. Now, I did have a hard time finding any concrete numbers for the Artura in particular, but I did notice there were some listings online where you could buy a 2023 Artura for $209,890. That would mean that the depreciation is quite high for this car, but for the sake of today's video, let's just use the 25% depreciation rate over 5 years. I think that's rather reasonable, which means that our total depreciation for this car on a yearly basis is $13,250. Now, for taxes and fees and registration, as well as insurance, I was way off in my estimates.
Yeah, so for registration, I thought it was going to be like $800 a year, but you said it was much higher. What is it?
I think it's about $2,000 a year.
$2,000 just for registration?
Just registration, yeah. Insurance for this one, I think, is around $4,000 a year.
$4,000 a year. Okay.
Yeah.
That's actually not as bad as I thought, because my Mercedes over there is $3,000 a year. So I was like,
yeah, actually, so it might be a little bit more. It might be closer to like 45 or 48. Okay. I don't know. It's like I bundle insurance, so I don't know the exact cost, but it's all based on mileage too.
Yeah.
So whereas with your Mercedes, you're probably 15,000 miles.
Yeah.
This is registered or insured for I think like 2,500.
Got it.
So the cost was much less. If this was being driven 10,000, 15,000 miles a year, you're probably like $6,000 of insurance, right?
Okay.
So,
all right, so registration was $2,000 as you heard from his mouth, much more than I thought, and insurance was $4,500 for 2,500 miles per year. If we were actually driving this car with normal mileage, it could be upwards of $6,000, maybe even $7,000 per year or more, depending on your driving record.
Okay, and what about fuel?
You have to fill up with the highest grade gas. So I think it's about $60 to $70 per fill up.
Okay.
And I probably get, depending on how aggressive I'm driving, anywhere from 150 to 225 miles for a tank.
For a tank, okay.
Yeah.
So you're probably filling up 10 to 15 times per year, which is actually not that much.
Yeah, exactly. So especially, because I'm not driving this car every single day. So, that's it's kind of fill up when I need to,
So already we can see that this is shaping up to be a very expensive car to own, but we still needed more information on how much maintenance costs because I have no idea where this could have gone. I've heard reports that some parts can be very expensive to replace and seemingly normal oil changes could actually cost you upwards of thousands of dollars. So let's see what Alex says.
Average year, how much do you think you spend maintaining this car? If you had to ballpark it.
Yeah, without paying for anything, like for instance brakes or anything like that, which I haven't had to do on this car yet. Just service and maintenance alone, you're probably talking about $1,000 to $1,500. A normal car has a lot of components that are relatively inexpensive, depending on what kind of car you have. You just magnify every one of these components, exponentially for the cost, right?
Yeah.
So brakes. Carbon ceramic brakes, if you got to replace those, and not just the pads but the rotors, that can be $10,000 by itself.
Yeah.
So you can see every component can be a very expensive piece.
Yeah, so every component there could be quite expensive to replace or maintain depending on the component and depending on the supercar. The fact is that there's just not many of these supercars being made in general across all brands. So when it comes to repairs, a lot of these parts are going to be special ordered, and the service departments don't really benefit from any economies of scale like they would at, say, a Toyota dealership. It's hard to estimate the maintenance costs per year, but let's say you take it for one singular $1,500 maintenance per year, plus you have some random miscellaneous part that needs fixing, you could be looking at a minimum of $3,000. Of course, it also depends on what type of warranty you might have and what's covered, but we'll set the maintenance cost at $3,000 as an approximate estimate for now. The other thing Alex mentioned to me was that depending on how hard you drive the car, you could be replacing your tires quite often, which can definitely add up to your costs. So if you're somebody who likes to hit the track, or you really like to drive your supercar to its limits, say whenever you're driving to Chick-fil-A, you just want to get there as quickly as possible, your cost to own may go up.
Yeah, and you were telling me, like, depending on how aggressive you drive it, you might have to replace the tires, what, once every 2,500 miles if you really wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, these are Pirellis, so the Pirellis are super sticky.
Yeah.
And that's great for handling, but bad for tire wear. So, I mean, depending on how aggressive you are and with your, acceleration, with your turning, cornering, with braking, all that kind of stuff, that can all have effects on the tires.
And each set of 4 costs what, like, how much per tire?
Yeah, depending on if you get the regular Pirellis or the Corsas, which are the race tires, they can be anywhere from about $2,000 to $3,000 for a set.
Famously, the more high end you go, the more you will pay for replacement tires. So Bugatti Veyrons, as an example, a set of 4 tires could cost you upwards of $42,000. Now, lastly, we should estimate our financing costs. Now, Alex did not share whether or not he leased or financed the car, but assuming you wanted to finance to own the car and you put 10% down, your cost to finance it over 5 years is going to come out to $38,152. That comes out to roughly $7,630 per year. Now, the truth is that many supercar owners will probably just keep their cars for a year or 2 and then trade it in for another one. But still, even if you trade in your supercar for another, you're likely still paying comparable costs to own for a different model of one. All right, so that actually brings our final table to look something like this. These are the expenses per year on all of our classes of cars today. Okay, so if we add up all of these costs for just a year, so all of these expenses right here, the total cost to own a cheap or budget car is $9,156 per year. For a luxury car, that might look like around $20,236. And for the supercar today, it comes out to $31,430, but remember guys, that's just for 2,500 miles. The other 2 classes of cars, the luxury and the cheap car, are rated for 15,000 miles each. If we actually did drive a supercar for 15,000 miles, I could easily see our costs being double that or maybe even triple that depending on what you had to replace. In terms of a salary suggestion for a supercar, your car payment is going to look anywhere between $3,000 to $5,000 per month depending on how much you put down. So let's pretend your car payment is $3,500 a month. Then at minimum, you should be making $420,000 a year just to afford the payment. If we included the other costs to own the car, realistically, you should be making north of $600,000 per year to comfortably afford the car. And hopefully you already have enough emergency funds in your bank account for random one-off maintenance costs. Supercars are for people who have no debt, in my opinion, who have fully stocked emergency funds, who can probably pay for their car in cash and have their home and family life taken care of already. Ideally, if you are buying a $250,000 car, you have so much money that a $250,000 purchase is not going to change your life one way or another. I would love to hear from you guys what car you drive and how much it costs to own, so make sure to leave a comment down below. And if you are wondering what the best rules are for car affordability, make sure to check out my next video right here on how much of a car you can afford. I think you'll really like that. Thanks for watching all, and thanks again to Alex for being in the video. I will see you guys in a future one on the channel. All right, peace.
I mean, I like the doors go up. They
I
go
mean,
like
that's
this.
the obviously, yeah, the doors going up is definitely the most eye-catching feature for McLarens, I think.
Yeah.
I've always had a fascination and love of cars, and then it was just like a love of the design, the engineering, the experience driving these things, especially when you get them on track. It's just like it's something that is you can't be replaced in any other like kind of facet of life, I guess you could say. So.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, and thanks for coming on the channel, Alex.
Yeah.